Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying your spring so far. Farmers markets are open, cherry blossoms are blooming, the sun has been shining intermittently in the Pacific Northwest. It's just starting to feel like things are coming back to life, after what felt like a cold, long, hard winter or year and a half. So, welcome back to Outside the Studio. Today, I'll be introducing you to Michelle Thompson, who is someone that I've had the opportunity to sit in circle with and share, and to share, yes, but also to receive wisdom from her. She's one of those people that she'll like open her mouth and drop a wisdom bomb. And I always remember sitting there feeling like, gosh, I just want to capture everything that comes out of Michelle's mouth. So, which is one of the reasons why I felt like it was important to have her on the podcast. And also because so much has shifted in her life recently, and she's gone down a whole new path, which we'll go into detail over, but it's lending itself to her offering her teachings of yoga and of coaching to the world at large, which is, one of the silver linings of going through COVID and having things shift so radically for Michelle. It created this new avenue for a more creative life, or a more maybe fulfilling life. I'm not trying to put words in Michelle's mouth, but this is my interpretation. So with a grain of salt, just take that. um, so yeah, I had the pleasure again of being in Michelle's home. Her husband is this amazing artist, so you'll see in the background just a little bit of artwork on the walls, and it just felt like, gosh, these last couple of episodes, it's been interesting that I've been surrounded by art, so there's kind of this thread there that I've been following, which maybe is its own conversation in and of itself. So, without further ado, I will introduce you to Michelle and let us take the conversation away. I hope you enjoy this episode. If you have any follow-up questions, any comments, any feedback, please let me know. It really helps me to guide future conversations to hear back from you all. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy. All right, Michelle. It's so nice to have you here. Thank you for having me in your beautiful home. It's nice to see you in person. It's been I can't even remember the last time I saw you.
Long time in person. Like
obviously over a year.
Yeah, like a year and a half.
Okay. So it's funny how like time to me feels like such this intangible thing that like expands and contracts when I don't see someone.
Mm-hmm.
It could be years, it could be months, and then I see someone and I'm like, oh yeah, Michelle, like we hang out all the time.
And it's confusing because we see, more than ever, we see each other through social media, and it feels like we're seeing each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. But physically, we haven't sat across from each other for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
We had that lunch together.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. When we wrapped up a teacher training together, Yoga Nidra, weren't you?
Was that before or after? I can't remember if that was before or after.
It was like
October?
right in the very beginning.
It might have been actually. We might have actually beginning. No, I didn't attend that.
Oh, okay.
I did the Yoga Nidra.
Yeah, so
which was at the end, like October, I want to say, of 2019.
Yeah, I was there.
So I was there. So we might have seen each other. That might have been the last time.
Yeah. So Michelle and I have done countless teacher trainings together.
Yeah. Through Rosie.
The last one we did together was Yoga Nidra, which most of you that listen to this already know what Nidra is because you may have listened to my recordings, you may have heard me talk about it before, but just in case you're new to the concept of Nidra, it is, and feel free to expound upon this, Michelle, from your perspective, but Nidra is a Sanskrit word that means sleep. And Yoga Nidra is, I like to describe it as a guided meditation that you do lying down on your back, much like you would perform Shavasana, but with all of the accoutrements of being in like this really cozy cocoon. So you want to pad the back of your head, you want to provide support for the cervical spine and the neck, the hips, be warm and cozy, and just lie back and have this experience of someone guiding you through a
physical experience in your body, and also it can be kind of an emotional experience. Yeah.
Just kind of going into the ether, traveling through outer space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you get messages, you get insight, you rest. Like it's magical rest. I use it when I'm exhausted, and I come out of it feeling so much better, regardless of what's going on in my life.
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the key differentiators of Yoga Nidra is the rest piece of it. That it's so restorative that I oftentimes, if I can't sleep at night, there was that period when we were going through Yoga Nidra training, I was having this weird bout of insomnia.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And so Nidra was the only thing really, I felt like, that kept me functioning on a day-to-day basis, because I was maybe sleeping for 2 to 3 hours solid if I was lucky. And so I'd get up maybe at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning and have a Nidra practice. I had the joy of being able to listen to my teacher, her little voice in my ear.
It's magical. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that can be used proactively and reactively. You know, like I find that I want to be as proactive as I can in keeping that health around my sleep and just giving myself that space to really explore. But when you're troubled, like with you in your sleep, like it can be even when I am dealing with a lot of stress and waking up early with anxiousness, I will do Yoga Nidra in the morning.
Yeah.
And because I see it like I didn't sleep very well or enough, and I know I've got a big day ahead of me, and I just need that deep rest.
Yeah.
You know, like that. And plus it helps me to solve whatever is creating the anxiety underneath.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and solving anxiety, or like you said, receiving messages, is another key differentiator of a Nidra practice. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Like, what have you experienced in that way?
No, it's been incredible. I never thought honestly, I've been practicing yoga for over 15 years, probably going on 20 now, and I did not have meditation as part of my practice for many years, and mostly because I thought I couldn't do it. And so once I started learning about all these other forms of rest and meditation, and you know, Yoga Nidra, for example, I just found that it allowed me to let go to the point where I could release. And it seems almost, when you're in that space of fear and confusion and stress, you don't even know a world outside of that. It's like that becomes your world. But for whatever reason, I would be able to go into this space, especially with Yoga Nidra, and I could be free from everything. Like I didn't, because when you're meditating, you almost don't know you're meditating. You're just out there in this darkness, not scary darkness, but you're just out. And but I would find that sometimes, you know, I would have more of a lucid experience than just a nothing experience, which was lovely itself. But the lucid would be where I would actually start to receive messages. And there were, the one that brings me back the most was I had this situation with an individual in my life, and I couldn't figure out what they were teaching me or why we were together, because we didn't feel very productive together. There was a lot of clashing, and this was several years ago, and I remember being in that space where I was a bit lucid in my meditation, and I had this experience that showed me a whole different view of my relationship with that person. And it was life-changing in so many ways. First of all, it gave me this whole different perspective of how I would work with this individual, because we think we know everything because we are so egocentric, right? We think, oh, I know exactly how this looks and feels and tastes and whatever. But in reality, there can always be other perspectives that we didn't get or we don't know yet. And when I had that, and it had been like 7 years I had been working with that person, and when I got that information, it changed everything. And I had this heart full of compassion for the relationship, for the person, And I didn't have that before. And it just allowed me to be there in that relationship in a very different and much more productive way than I was before. So when I seek that now, like when I go into my meditation, it's either usually I just need to just let go and do whatever, I just rest and explore. I kind of just go on my explorations sometimes, but I also use my meditations to get inside and really understand what I'm missing, or other perspectives and insight into where I'm going or what I'm supposed to do with certain information. So I just love it now. Like I can't get enough of it.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, and speaking of challenging situations and anxiety, this past year for so many of us has been ripe with that. And personally, because I know you've been going through some massive changes in your life. I'm wondering, you don't share whatever you feel comfortable with sharing, but like highlights I know are change to a new state, a new city, buying a home, changing a job that you had been at for over a decade. How long?
Oh, 23 years.
Okay, so multiple decades.
Big. Yeah.
And now it's like, I'm wondering what you're doing next. So that's so many questions.
Yeah.
If you want to start from, the beginning, wherever you feel comfortable starting.
Yeah, I think back now that you put it in that perspective. I honestly didn't think about it until now, but I remember seeing a list of like the top 10 most stressful things you could go through. And I think about, like divorce and moving and job change and those big things, right? And now that I'm thinking about it, like I did some pretty big things this past year in the midst of the pandemic, right? So, but I think so just to put it on the table, so I left the job that I'd been in for 23 years. I moved into a brand new home out of state, and I, dealt with the challenges that we all are dealing with the uncertainty of the pandemic and the fear. But I have to say that there was something that felt safe about what I was doing. Like it's not like I'm still in this place of the unknown. So I don't want to sugarcoat anything, but I really thought long and hard about what I was doing. Now, some of it I couldn't control the timing, right? My house was ready to move in on a certain day, and I moved in. That was kind of in motion. It was actually in motion first. That was the first thing that happened, and then then pandemic, and then a few months later came my job shift. But I think the thing that I did that I feel really helped me to stay grounded was I sought the guidance and help of a number of people. So I kind of formed this tribe around me, if you will. I had a therapist, and I really want to push that therapy is cool. I think everybody should have a therapist, just like you have a doctor, just like you have a friend, just like it should be normal. And the next thing I did was I continued working with my life coach, and I actually hired a personal trainer.
Cool.
I even went as far as working with a nutritionist, and I had access to healthcare at the time, and so I just decided, I'm going to do these things. And I know that it's not easy for everybody to have all those people, but there are ways to do it. Sometimes one person can act as a number of experts, so you just find the right type of people. I'm not saying you have to have 5 different people, but I really felt like I built this group around me that in one respect felt selfish, but in another respect it felt like this is what I need right now in my life, and I want to be as strong and healthy as I can be to move through this big shift that is happening. And I have children and my husband, and I'm an important part of my family and in my friends' lives, and so I wanted to be able to be there for everybody and for myself. And I don't, I really value every day of my life. So I think that was probably the biggest thing that I felt really proud of. But going through it, like there were ups and downs, and there were days that, you know, you question what you did, but there was something that was at the base of my decision to keep going. It just felt like it was time for me to to listen to these other messages that I needed to be exploring. And, you know, I'd done my time in terms of exploring the path I was on with my job, and I had such an amazing life up until that point, like meeting people, traveling the world. But there was another thing calling me around my yoga and my coaching and my ability to help people recognize their own opportunity for healing, and to own and live into their greatness.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was something that I started to do in parallel with my time that I had now had, which was like I'd never taken more than 2 weeks off in my life
Mm-hmm.
from 16 when I started working. So when I had this time, I really wanted to use it wisely and
Mm-hmm.
and feed my own soul and others.
Yeah, I appreciate that so much. And I also think you hit on something key with like at the beginning of that, feeling selfish
Mm-hmm.
as you were gathering your
Mhm.
mentors, your tribe, your support system. I mean, I struggle with that too. So I can, first of all, I empathize with the word selfish, and also I feel like it's important to call it out and remind ourselves that being selfish doesn't have to be a negative thing,
Mhm.
because we often say it with the negative connotation in mind. And I'm not saying that's what
Mhm.
you were doing, but I'm saying, like, I think it's important as we all think about what a tumultuous year we had, and maybe even continuing into 2021. Certainly
Mhm.
it has been for me. No, not you all, but it's good to take care of yourself. It's good to love on yourself, and you can really only love others to the extent that you love yourself. So being, in my opinion, being selfish is an act of love. And it's not only an act of love for yourself, but it's an act of love for those that are in your household, and in, you know, wherever you come into contact with people these days,
Mhm.
whatever that looks like. So yeah, I just wanted to.
Yeah, I think that's a really
that out a little
good
bit.
point to kind of explore a little bit more, because, you know, our culture has created this perception that self-care is like martyrdom, you know, where, you know, oh, lucky you that you have time to take a bath. Well, I didn't have time to take a bath today. Well, you know, that should not be, like, first of all, if you don't have time to take a bath, then we need to address that in itself, right? Like,
Yeah.
we've grown so much as a community, but we've grown apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need to come back to where we connect in a way that is supportive. You know, if you go back hundreds of years, you know, you typically lived near your family members, like extended family, aunts and uncles and cousins, and you know, you had this support system. And so you know, they say that the sayings, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to raise us all. Like, you know, we should be a village. And when we live in these homes, these beautiful homes, we're separated, or any home, right? It doesn't, I shouldn't have said beautiful, because it doesn't matter what kind of home you live in. But when you live in your home and you're alienated and you're trying to be by yourself, or, you know, raising your family, or whatever it is you're trying to do, it's really difficult to do everything by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not meant to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if we have the opportunity to take care of ourselves in a way that allows us to be there for others, then that's more important than anything. And and I was able to do that, right? I was able to take care of myself, and I didn't fall apart, you know, because I had people who were checking on me regularly, and who were noticing if I was starting to fall apart, and they were helping me to get back up.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I want to do is do the same thing for people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and that's not what I want to do, that's what I do,
Mm-hmm.
right? I look for people who, I don't look for people, but when I'm talking to my friends, and, even people that I don't know at the grocery store, you know, I'll look for people that need something, you know, that need just to be thanked, or, you know, just to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
Because that's just what we should be doing for everybody. Right?
Yeah. I appreciate that. It reminds me of this experience I had on Friday. My husband and I were going out of town, and as we were getting ready, we were almost going to get on the freeway, and we were at a stoplight, and the guy to our right rolled down his window. He's like, "Hey, your back tire's low." And we were like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much," because we were getting ready to drive up to Seattle, which is a long drive. And so we were like, okay, luckily to our left was a gas station with a pump, an air pump. So we pulled over, returned into the parking lot. And as we're getting ready to drive up next to the pump, there was a young guy there. And he he was obviously stressed out. He was like rummaging around in his car, looking for coins, trying to get the pump to work. And he's like, he turns to me and he's like, "Do you have 2 quarters by chance?" Just exasperated and stressed out. And I never have coins, but for some reason I did. I had exactly 2 quarters, exactly what he asked for. And I was like, "Well, yes, I do. Here you go." And he got the tire in his car, visibly relieved. He's like, "Thank you so much." And then he goes on his way. And then we're like, "Okay, it's our turn." So we started to, you know how you can measure the PSI on your tire? We're like, "Oh, it's not even that low. Like, our tires are fine." And to me in that moment, I was like, oh, this was supposed to happen. I was supposed to be here. We were supposed to take this extra 5 minutes or whatever it was to help this guy. This guy obviously needed help.
Really bad.
He needed like an angel to come in. Not that I'm an angel, but he needed
that kind of
somebody's help. And so I so appreciate those little like nudges that life gives us that they can, you know, depending on how you're feeling in that moment. If we were in a hurry, if we were like, "Oh, we have to get to Seattle by 6:00 and blah blah blah," then we might have been irritated and missed that lesson and opportunity. So
true.
I just think about community in that way. It doesn't have to be like every day I have to you know, hang out with somebody or meet somebody new, but there's always these little moments of opportunity where you can touch somebody, even with your mask on. It makes a difference to smile. You can see the smile behind somebody's mask.
Light up.
Yeah. And what does that do? It's like a yawn. It's contagious.
It is. Well, I was just gonna say, like, you create a ripple. You create a ripple of goodness that flows through the world, because you just changed his day. Like, he was clearly distraught over the fact that he couldn't find 2 quarters. Like, we have no idea where he was going next.
Exactly.
He could have been going, I'm sure he was going somewhere very important, right? Because he needed that. And you saw that distraught behavior. But when we just take a moment to do just something kind, we create a ripple. You know, we create that, and it flows through, because that changes his demeanor, and then the next person, and then the next person, and then the next person. So it just keeps going. So I couldn't agree more. I mean, if we have the opportunity to influence somebody in such a loving and positive way, you know, it doesn't take much. 2 quarters.
It really doesn't. 2 quarters.
And a 5-minute
stop.
stop.
Afford that. So what is the future, you know, if you're seeing into your future, because right now you're building, are you building a new business right now?
So I've been coaching individuals, and I am still teaching yoga. I teach a lot of different classes. I teach 4 different classes each week. And I've been conducting some workshops, and I'm actually volunteering as well with a nonprofit. So I have my hands in a lot of different things right now. And I'm trying to figure out, like, what does that look like? How can I continue to have this freedom to do as much as I'm doing, and still make a living? So that's something I'm working on. So it's to be continued.
Cool.
To be determined.
And are you teaching classes through Imagine Yoga Studio?
No, I actually started to just teach myself.
Cool.
I just teach out of my home, and I have to tell you that the most interesting thing I've noticed is that the communities, like I teach people of all ages, anyhow, but I did create early on in September of last year I partnered with my friend's daughter, who was at the time I think she was 12, and I just had this this compassion for these kids going through this pandemic and dealing with school and the uncertainty of everything in their lives, and so we together, my young friend and I, created a teen yoga and meditation mindfulness class.
Cool. Yeah.
And so that has continued on, and I absolutely love working with them. And now we're exploring more of like a mixed approach of yoga and then chair yoga, so they can do things while they're sitting at their desk.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that was really interesting is I started to expand my regular classes, like my calm class and my alignment class. But I noticed that my older practitioners were struggling in certain poses, not just older people, but any type of limitation. They were struggling to maybe sit a certain way on the floor, or, there just were limitations. And so I ended up creating a chair yoga class for people that had limited mobility. And that class, talk about, they show up every week. They just are so willing to explore and move their bodies in ways that they can, but they just show up.
Yeah.
And I chose early on to incorporate, like, usually about 10 minutes of meditation, guided meditation at the end of each class. And I think that has been a huge help. Like, I can't speak for all of them, but I know that they've shared their feedback with me, just having that time to let go. And like we talked about at the beginning, just having access to actually meditating, even though you might think you're not able to. So those few minutes at the end of all the classes, it's just so wonderful to watch everybody, because like the young kids, they just like go into this, most of them curl up in a cocoon on their side, or and then people that are sitting in their chairs just kind of go into this space of just relaxation, and some of the other people are like, just show me the way. And it's just been so lovely to see everybody navigating in helpful ways. There's nothing more lovely than a good yoga class and a meditation that for getting you through these days of craziness. So
And I'm happy to hear that there's an offering for a chair yoga specific class. I don't see that often.
I know.
And you do this on your own platform. Do you have I can share a website or a link to
they
that?
can reach out to me. I mean, we can put that in the notes of that class on how they can reach out to me. But it just turned out that I started doing it through my husband helped me set up my studio, and I have the ability to have people just dial in through Zoom, and everything they need is there. And
great. Well, I definitely want to share that with
I'd love to.
Who I think chair yoga is such a wonderful thing.
And it's kind of one of, I think it's becoming more and more as an available option to people, not just because of limited mobility, but I think that it's really important to learn about your body in this position, in this seated position, because it's actually quite difficult for the body to stay in this seated position. And I can tell you from all the work I had to do with my, doctors, even my physical trainer or personal trainer, because, there were muscles in my body that had stopped working right because I had been seated so long working in a desk all day, every day. So anyhow, the other thing that was fascinating about chair yoga is that it's accessible to everybody, right? Like young kids, teens, adults, like people with limited mobility. Like you can do so much just from a chair. And not that it's easier, because you can do poses that are very challenging with a chair. It can become a prop and allow you to do things that you never imagined. But it can also be, less intense and just a support structure for you to be able to move your body freely.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, I think, chair yoga was just something that didn't seem to be very mainstream, but I think now people are realizing that there's so much value to learn how you can be moving safely and effectively, just stretching and bringing prana and life force back to your body as you sit for hours.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so important too, from the perspective of an office worker, or if you're traveling a lot and you're sitting on a plane, as things start to open up and ramp up.
Absolutely.
We might find ourselves sitting even more.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't go wrong taking a chair yoga class, and I think it just teaches you awareness, and it absolutely teaches you ways to position your body in the most effective way to allow yourself to still get the circulation you need, and to not actually have a low back pain when you stand up. Right? Because there's just so much strain on your low back when you're seated. So you can sit in a proper way and
can we have like a really short can you adjust me in my seat right now? Like talk me through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So the first thing I would recommend is if you have access to either pronging your fingers or grabbing the edge of the seat, but lift your bottom up and let it sit back so that your bottom's a little bit behind so that you actually have a tall spine.
Okay.
And then allow your spine from the tailbone all the way to the crown to be really long and tall. And then just take a nice deep breath in and just let everything out. And just allow yourself to be supported by the surface below you as you focus on your breath. And just breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. You don't have to adjust anything around your breath. Just let it flow. And just notice. Take a moment as you're breathing just to notice what feels good. And you can soften your forehead and your throat. Relax your jaw. See if you can melt your shoulders a little bit further away from your ears. Soften your chest and your upper back, your belly and your low back. And just bring ever so slight a smile to your face. So that's how we start our classes.
I love that. I feel so relaxed.
Yeah, and it makes a huge difference when you allow your body to have the proper circulation and flow, and you can do so much with your breath seated. You can, and then once you start to do it more, you realize when you're sitting on the couch or at the dinner table that there's ways that you can help your body to function better so that you won't hurt when you're standing or laying in bed.
Yeah. Oh, Michelle, I'm so excited for everyone to get to experience your chair yoga, and I would like to too. Do you have like a regular, I'm going to share this in the show notes, but just for my edification, is it once a week?
I do. I teach these classes once a week at a certain day and time, and I'm happy to share that information. And, if there's enough interest, I can add classes, so it just depends. I'm open to that, and I can do one-on-one settings as well. I'm open to pretty much anything right now.
Oh, I love that. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so this will be my last question. I want to be mindful of our
Absolutely.
time. And before we started recording, Michelle shared with me a pretty cool motto. And so I want to hear, and this might be the answer to it, and if it's not, maybe we can throw it in there. But what words of wisdom do you live by? Is the question.
Oh, there's a few things that come to mind. What was the one I told you? I'm blanking on the one I told you.
You were describing this project that you had been working on, and you were telling me about the ethos of the project itself.
So
I couldn't tell you word for word.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, there's a few things. I mean, I was rambling earlier, so I know I covered quite a bit, but there's a few things that come to mind. And I think it goes back to even what we were saying earlier. One of the first things that I think is so important is that we focus on ourselves so that we can be there for others, for taking care of ourselves. But I think that the other thing that I'm super passionate about right now is exploring as much as I can in this world. And that has some perceived obstacles, because when you explore, sometimes you face things that seem a little scary. But I have to say, and this is with the help of my guides that I mentioned, because some of my guides were really pushing me to take on things that I was, a little wary of. But when I did the things that, I had in front of me that I needed to do, it was pretty empowering. And I think when you go out and you take the opportunity to explore, there's so much that comes from that experience. There's learnings, there's obstacles that you get to overcome, there's things that you learn that you like, there's things that you learn that you don't care for. And so, with my friends and my family, especially my kids, I'm always talking to them about exploring, because you can always, like, if you don't know something, then by exploring you get to determine whether, it resonates with you. But if you don't do it, then you will never know. So the best thing that I focus on is just getting out there and challenging myself. And there's the other thing that's come up quite frequently, even today in one of my conversations with a client, was just taking steps towards whatever it is you're trying to work on. And sometimes, you don't have to go all the way to the end. Like it's what's the next tiny step that you need to make, and what does it feel like? Are you okay? Okay, let's take another one. Are you okay? Okay, let's take another one. So far, so good. And before you know it, you're like 20 steps in, and you're like, what was I afraid of? Like, this is fine. I'm totally fine. But and all along those tiny steps, you're building confidence over and over and over. And before you know, you look back and you're like, wow, I'm pretty impressed, And so, like, that's really been my mantra, is just like challenging myself, because when you walk along a certain path, sometimes you let things go. When I was working in corporate America, I didn't do certain things as much, like personal passions, like writing, and and I got away from that. And so when I went to write, I'm like, I don't have anything to say. Like, I have no words of wisdom. I don't even have a clue. But I just kind of said, I'm not going to look at anybody else's writings. I'm not going to research what I have to talk about. I'm just going to talk about it. And I wrote about it. And then the next time I wrote about it. And then the next time I wrote about something else. And then before I knew it, I'm like, this is kind of fun. This feels good. So I think if I had any words of wisdom, it would be to really pursue some of those things that you are passionate about, that you might be afraid to conquer, like you're afraid of failing or afraid of loving, or, whatever your fear is, try to honor it and acknowledge it. And if it's your inner critic talking to you, just acknowledge those words of advice. Your inner critic's trying to protect you, and there are times when you need to go beyond what your inner critic believes you should be doing. So in those moments that seem a little bit scary, if you just let that inner critic know that you've got this, I'm good, thank you for your advice, but I'm going to try this. Then it doesn't feel so scary, and you just realize that it's okay, I can do this, and then you're really proud of it. So
thank you. I really appreciate that you address the inner critic. I think that's such a key step that we oftentimes forget unless we're really practiced at working with our internal monologue. And I so appreciate that because I have such a strong, I call it my judge.
Yeah.
My judge is so judgy.
Yeah, they really are.
And
difficult.
so it's helpful
Yeah.
though, because it's your inner judge is like, hey, I'm just trying to protect you.
Yeah.
It's helpful to acknowledge those. So thank you for saying
Yeah.
that. And then to not let the judge be the one that's driving and
Mm-mm.
making the decisions all
No.
the time. Because oftentimes it is coming from a place of fear. And maybe
Yeah.
there's maybe some of that is warranted. Like there's a certain amount of risk,
yeah.
right?
You want to acknowledge it. That's why you
Yeah.
honor it, because if there is advice in there that's like saying to you, I wouldn't recommend that you do that because the risk is extremely great, you know,
Mhm.
and it's, you know, could potentially cost you your life.
Mhm.
You know, you need to listen. Like there are times when your inner critic is truly something you need to, those words need to be heeded. You know,
Mhm.
you need to listen to those. But oftentimes what we face on a daily basis is just like, you know, you don't need to do that.
Mhm.
Or that's, you know, what happens if, you know, you do this, then everybody's going to think you're that, you know.
Mhm.
You know, you're putting yourself out there. But I tell you, you know, when you put yourself out there, I think that's when you grow exponentially.
Mhm.
You know, when you get vulnerable with yourself, I think that's kind of the key word these days. Is, you know, Brene Brown is amazing, and she talks about the power of vulnerability, and I couldn't agree more. Like, I think there is something so empowering, not only for you, but for everyone around you.
Mhm.
The moment you get vulnerable, you give permission to everybody that has a contact with you that, you know, that they can do the same.
Mhm.
And then when we operate from that place of authenticity and vulnerability, then you get to see the real everybody.
Yeah.
And then you realize that this perceived, whatever it is, like, you know, achievement or whatever, some of these things aren't even real.
Mhm.
Like, so the more you just act in this authentic way, the more everybody gets to do the same.
Mhm.
And then we're normalized back to where we're human and we're interacting with our fears and weaknesses and strengths and whatever they are. You know,
Mhm.
we get to do it together.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much,
You're
Michelle.
welcome.
Thanks for inviting us into your beautiful
Yes,
home.
you're welcome.
I hope you all enjoyed this episode. I will be definitely sharing links to all of your yoga classes,
Yes.
but I'd love to
Yeah.
highlight chair yoga. I think that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if you have any questions for us, please let me know, and take care of yourselves. Be selfish.
Yeah.